All right, in this Yin Yoga practice, you might want a couple blocks. We're going to work towards recovering the body from achy muscles or exhausted muscles. So we're going to sit in an easy seated position to begin. I'm sitting on a block. This helps lift my hips to lower my knees and allow for an easier range of motion, a bigger, wider range of motion in the external thigh rotation in the hips. Once you're in a seated position, line your ears up over your shoulders and your shoulders up over your hips. And you can feel your chin level with your chest, the back of your head lined up over the back of your hips. Inhale from your belly into your back and start to collect your breath here. Take a moment simply to check in and notice any physical, emotional, or mental sensations. Be aware of any gripping in your hands or your jaw, your face, and try to soften any of these areas so that you can just feel the breath and your body oscillating with this movement. And then we'll move over into hands and knees position in the next breath or two. Keep that block handy. I'm going to uncross my ankles and take my ankles on either side of this block so I can sit back down on the block, moving into Virasana, hero pose. This is a wonderful stretch for the front of your ankles, your shins, and your quads. So if you walk a lot, running, this is a really good recovery for that. If you don't need the block, you can definitely remove it. Or if you need 2 blocks, stick another block in there. But feel your weight fall back into your sit bones. And once again, feel this lineup of your throat, over your heart, over your pelvis. So it's ears, shoulders, hips as well. Think of it that way. Spread out your toes behind you and just let your hands rest in your lap as you sit here and feel your joints, the knees, the ankles, and the hips responding to this posture. Again, your breath is moving always from your belly and expanding 3-dimensionally. And again, the oscillation of the breath and the body, this movement that we're looking for here, like a waving motion. Even in stillness, finding movement. And just another breath or two here, and we're going to come back over to hands and knees. All right, and then on your next inhale, start to come off the block and come out of the seated position into a hands and knees position. So now I'm going to take my knees back or the block forward, and now the block is between my knees. And I'm squeezing the block with my inner knees. And I'm going to take some cat-cow stretches here. Inhale, open your chest, look forward. And exhale, round your spine. Drop your chin, start to look under. If you feel like your hands are too far forward, pull them back in under your shoulders. Squeeze the block with your knees. Inhale, open your chest, lift your chin. And keep your chest moving through your shoulders. Exhale, round your spine. Tuck your chin, look under. Squeeze the block. Point your toes back. Inhale, soften the front of your spine and engage the back muscles to lengthen your spine and extend your back in a little arch here. Exhale, round your spine, and remember to squeeze the block. And that helps to engage the core and slow down the movement. Good. Inhale, back to table pose. Open the spine, look up. Exhale, round. And then this time we're going to come up to kneeling. So pull your weight back into your knees a little bit more. Take the block between your hands. Squeeze the block with your hands and press the block up to the ceiling and behind for a very gentle little kneeling upward hand pose. And keep squeezing the block as you inhale, lengthen your spine. Okay, exhale, take the block back down in between your knees. Grab a second block here. So now we're going to squeeze between the knees with the block and squeeze between the hands with the block. And keep the squeeze in both as you press the fronts of your ankles down. Again, inhale, lengthen your spine, and as you exhale, lift your chest through a little higher. You can look forward or you can look up. If looking up puts too much pain in your back, just simply look forward. And you could even have your hands out farther in front if the range of motion in your shoulders doesn't allow arms straight up to the ceiling, or bend your elbows and push into that block. All right, one more big inhale. And then exhale, release your hands down, your arms down, take the block to the side, and get the block out from between your two knees. I'm going to keep those two blocks handy. I'm going to have them up at the top of my mat so I can step my right foot forward into a lunge. I like the blocks here simply because I don't want to go down in a forward bend. I actually want to keep my head up over my hips. So this is targeting the front of the left hip, the psoas, which is a muscle that often is overworked as a hip flexor, whether you're a runner or a walker or a bicyclist, if it's warm where you are and I've been outdoors doing a lot of stuff, gardening, right? So we need to open up that front left hip. I'm actually taking my hands back a little farther and playing with this. It didn't feel so good. So explore some different placements of the block and notice where you can feel stability in the front leg. So strength in the front leg, but a nice stretch in the front of the back hip. And it could be hands down a little lower. So maybe you don't need that big back bend to feel a stretch in the front of your hip. Wherever you are, your chest is moving through your shoulders and you're opening your heart and extending your spine with the inhale. Lengthen your spinal muscles, and on the exhale, press your chest through, using the core to stabilize as well as mobilize. Breathing from your belly here right into those back ribs. Opening the airways, opening your torso, expanding your ribs. And then just one more breath here. We're going to move this into a half split so we can get the hamstrings of the right leg now. As you exhale, shift back, pull your hips back, straighten out your right leg. And if you've got those blocks, or if you weren't using them for that previous pose, maybe bring them in now. Because really, if you're up higher and lengthen out more, you'll probably get more shearing in the back of that right leg than you will if you forward fold down. It'll probably just get into your back. Push down into your left knee and lengthen through your spine. Again, that inhale lengthens, and then you can feel the exhale engage your abdominals to stabilize. Press out through the right foot. Maybe play with pointing your toes, pulling your toes back up. Just notice these little movements and how they affect the back of your right leg. Again, chest is moving beyond your shoulders though, so there's not a rounding in the back. There's an opening, an extension in the spine. And that's going to help with breathing and keeping your breath moving from your belly and oscillating around your body. So allowing in these stretches, there's some strength. The stability is the strength. But then there's mobility with the breath and relaxation and allowing some freedom of movement. Okay. All right, come back up with the right knee back through into tabletop. And I'm going to keep my hands on the blocks here. And then I'm going to take one block underneath my ribs. And then the other block, actually that block is going under my chest, so it's right up at the sternum. And the other block between my hands, Anahatasana. So hips stay over the knees, chest is down on the block, my forehead is just on the floor, maybe it's hovering over the floor, and then my arms above head are squeezing the block with my two hands. And it's not a massive squeeze, you're just holding the block, right? So you don't have to break the block. And then if you need to widen your knees out a little bit, please do, or let your feet turn out a little bit, please do. If you feel like you need to tuck your toes under, that's absolutely fine. But here, see if you can breathe from your belly into the back of your ribs, feeling the expansion here. And so if you find that if you're an athlete, if you're a runner, and if endurance and breathing is tough for you, this posture is going to help with that. Opening the airways, stretching the respiratory accessory muscles, the serratus anterior, the pecs, the throat muscles, the neck, the shoulders. And see where you can soften, but still keep core engagement for stability and for protection, for safety. All right, take your hands back to the floor so you can press up off of the block under your chest. And then we'll take that second side lunge. So get your 2 blocks again under your 2 hands, and then step your left leg forward. So you're kneeling on the right, pat up the right knee if it's sensitive. So your left shin is vertical, the left knee is over your left ankle. And you start with the blocks. I'm starting with the blocks on the highest level so that I can just start in a gentle back bend. And then you can play with moving them back a little bit more. If that's too intense in your low back, walk the blocks forward. If you need to lower the blocks or move them forward to take this out of the intense back bend, you'll still get a wonderful stretch in the front of your right hip. Pointing your right big toe straight back will help stretch out the entire line of the front of the right leg. If you're taking a back bend, remember to, with your inhale, engage your back muscles and lengthen your spine so you avoid pinching the low back. And with your exhale, press the chest up to the ceiling using your core to tamp down and stabilize the posture. If that back bend was painful, hands come forward, blocks can lower down, and you can take it into more of a forward lean. And it's still a back bend. There's still extension in your low back. I'm just not rounding. Using the blocks to create some height, to provide height in your chest. And keep pushing down into your left foot. Imagine those 2 front hip bones drawing in toward each other, again, to provide some stabilization, especially within the next couple breaths as we transition into your half split. So take another nice smooth breath here. And then on your exhale, you can start to pull your hips back for your half split, Ardha Hanumanasana. Right hip comes back over your right knee, and then stretch out your left leg. And then again, use your hands on the blocks. You can play with your left foot moving around to explore some sensation in the back of your left leg. If you wanted to tuck your right toes under for more balance and stability, please do. And try not to lean on your hands, sending your shoulders up, sending your upper back to the ceiling. So try to push with your hands. And then again, with your inhale, lengthen your spine. And with your exhale, engage the front abdominals and open your chest through your shoulders. And when you're in these stretching poses, trying not to go for sensation. Yes, you're going to feel things, but we don't need to feel more. Because if you're feeling more, it could be then potential overstretching of the connective tissues, which is what we don't want. We want those guys to be tight. They hold you together after all. And breathe from your belly into your back. And then after the next round of breath, we're going to move this back into, again, the Anahatasana, heart opening pose. So you can walk your hands back under your shoulders and pull your left knee back next to your right knee. Situate the block again under your chest. It's on its lowest height. And then the second block comes out in front for my hands to gently press palms into. Forehead rests on the floor. Feel your sit bones widen, feel your low back relax. So if you feel like your low back is fighting this pose, maybe you need a higher or softer surface under your chest. Or maybe you need to come to forearms and to not have the block under your chest. And if you need your toes tucked under, that's fine. Sometimes a blanket under the forehead is helpful as well. And then check in with your shoulders and make sure that they're not chasing the block above head, that the shoulders are just sinking back into their joint. And your hands are just pressing in the block, not squeezing it to pieces. All right, next Big round of breath here. Finish it up. And then take your hands back under your shoulders and press the floor away so you can come up off the block. Crossing your ankles, come to a seated position. And I'm going to take Gomukhasana, so right leg on top of the left. Shoestring those legs, cow face pose. I've got my ankles flexed. I'm going to use my blocks here. And you can use the blocks however you'd like. If you want your hands reaching forward on the blocks. You can play with taking your feet up a little farther away from your hips so that your feet, maybe even come in like a little parallel line there, a little straight line there. I mean, there doesn't have to be any specific way, but just make sure your knees are not experiencing pain and your hips are not experiencing any achy, sharp sensations. Your forehead could rest on a block or two. Maybe you stack 2 blocks. And reposition your right leg, the top leg, so that if you need to pull the ankle over to the right, or if you can get the right knee over to the left, and you just play with this to where your body can go. So that there's a crossing of the right leg over the left. And you can feel the outer hip stretch. You can feel the low back stretch. And this time there is a rounding in your back, so you can let your shoulders soften. That's why I've got my forehead on a block, just letting the support of the block soften, kind of that pressure point. It just sends this biofeedback down the rest of my back, down into my hips, even down into my feet to soften and just kind of melt into this. But allow your breath to still be active and again, oscillating, moving your back, moving your ribs. You can feel your body flowing from the breath. Keeping your breath in and out of your nose. And notice as your breath paces itself out, as you pay attention to your breath, the rest of your body calms down. The gripping maybe is less. Notice your hands if they're gripping your toes and your jaw. And then inhale, start to lift your head up off your block. Press your weight back into your sit bones. You can take your hands behind you and start to uncross your legs. And we'll take the legs out in a wide angle forward fold here before moving on to the next side, just to get out of the knees, because those knees could get a little achy from that. If you want, simply stay upright with your legs out. Or the blocks are right there. You can let your head rest back onto the blocks. So I like to revisit the block under my ribs. So here's where I put the block under my ribs, below the chest, and then the second block under my forehead. So the block under my ribs prevents a collapse and keeps the spine smooth from tailbone to head, a nice smooth arc. And just let your sit bones root down into the earth. Your feet are slightly active. They don't need to be overactive. Heck, you might even just kind of let them relax a little bit and see where they naturally fall. And then just let your toes point up to the ceiling so that you're not over engaging your shin muscles or the outer shin muscles, the front or the outer. Let your forearms rest on the floor. Let your palms rest on the floor. You could flip your palms up if you just want to release some of that extra tension in your hands, if you feel like there's any there. Allowing the blocks to support your posture, but don't forget about your body. It's still engaged. Again, with the inhale, feel the lengthening of your spine, just a gentle lengthening. It's not overextending. And with your exhale, the stabilization of the core and it's not over contracting, so you can still breathe. Easy breath. And then take one more nice smooth round of breath here before we come up to seated. On your next inhale, you can start to lift your head off the block and walk your hands in so you can come upright. And then we'll get into that second side of Gomukhasana. So now my left leg's going to wrap on top of my right leg. One side is probably going to be different. So your feet may need to be closer to your hips on this side or farther away from your hips. You may need to pull the left knee over a little bit to the left and slide over to the ankle on your right knee. So if your left ankle is resting on top of your thigh, that's a good modification. Or if you're able to, you can pull your left knee over to the right more, eventually lining up your two knees. Please don't force it. So you've got your blocks handy for your head. You can stack 2 blocks, or if you've got a chair, this is really nice to use a chair seat to pillow your forehead on the chair seat with your forearms. And then notice if your ankles are, if your feet are turning in. And so there's just a very gentle, engaged awareness of your ankles. So you're just gently pressing the outer feet towards the floor, not over activating the feet or like over flexing the ankles. But just notice, like even feel the bottoms of your feet, even though they're not touching the floor, just feel the sense, the nerves there, your senses, your sense of feel. And then wherever your hands are, notice their sense of touch, the sense of feel here, where you can feel what your hands are doing. You can feel the block if your hands are on the block, or the mat if your hands are on your mat. In this forward bend, breath may feel challenging. So see if you can space out the front of your body a little bit by lengthening your back muscles with that inhale. And then when you exhale, again, it's that gentle contraction of the core, but it doesn't pull you in too much so that you lose space to breathe into, keeping space in the front of your body. With each breath, you can feel a broadening of the sacrum, broadening of the hips, and hopefully a gentle stretch in the outer hips. If your eyelids are closed down, just go inside and notice any thoughts. Notice any sensations. Be aware of any sensation, the good, the bad. So if you do feel uncomfortable here, I don't think you should really bear through it. I think you should adjust and get a little bit more comfortable. You can still get a wonderful stretch and mobilization in your joints without feeling intensity. Okay, inhale, plant your palms and start to roll yourself up to seated, coming out of that forward bend. And again, unwrap your legs. All right, I'm going to come to a reclining position. Have your 2 blocks handy. Lie down on your back. You can take your feet farther apart here, so your knees are together, or the knees are just up to the ceiling. So a little bit of a wider leg reclining constructive rest, just to let your back relax from that forward bend. I like my hands on the blocks. It just keeps my shoulders from overworking. All right, so I'm going to come up and set my 2 blocks up because I'm going to move this into a back bend with 2 blocks supporting my back bend. So you can see what I'm going to do here. I've got my 2 blocks. One is going to run lengthwise on my spine, and the second is going to be on its tallest height, and it's going to go under my head. So I'm going to show you Virasana approach here. This may be too intense for your knees. If this is not okay for your knees, then come back into the seated position with your feet on the floor. But I lean back, I lie back into a back bend so that the block under my spine is running up and down the skinny side of the block. And then there's the block under my head. You may need to set this up a few different times, and you might need that block under your back to go across your shoulder blades from left to right rather than up and down the length of your spine. And you might need it to be lower. But here, if you're in the hero position, you are gently pressing your hips up to the ceiling. So it's not a very active thrust up. It's just a gentle little energetic push up to the ceiling to relieve the low back. And again, if this is not comfortable for your knees or ankles, feet are on the floor, hips are on the floor, knees are to the ceiling. And see if here you can breathe from your belly into your back. And smooth out that breath. I'm going to take the block underneath my head out and put it under my hips. I was feeling a little pinch. And then if you notice, now my head drops back, and it just depends on your body. If you're feeling more pain in your low back, maybe put the block under your head. And if you have the mobility in your neck, then let your head come back to the floor. So it turns into a little bit more of a supine hero pose. Supta Virasana. And if you have a blanket or a pillow handy and you've taken that block from your head to your hips, maybe put a pillow or a blanket under your head for a little extra support if it's just too intense with your head to the floor. I'm keeping my elbows on the floor and my hands on my heels here just to keep my shoulders from collapsing. And I'm actively opening my chest even though I'm in this reclining position. Really breathe out into it. So if you wanted to, for the last couple rounds of breath, you could take your arms overhead and flip your palms up, as long as that doesn't put a pinch in your low back. All right, just a few more rounds of breath here. Keep a very gentle awareness of the front of your shins and the fronts of your feet on the floor. If your knees have slid open a little bit, that's fine. Please don't fight that. Let that happen. If you need to switch up your arm placement every once in a while, please do that, especially if you're getting any tingling in your fingers. And at any point in time, if you were in hero, hopefully if you were starting to get tingling in your toes or pain in your knees, you've come out of it and switched to the feet on the floor variation. Again, this is really helpful for boosting your endurance and opening the front of your hips. Okay, so I'm going to start to prepare to come out of this. Hands come back to my feet, elbows back to the floor. And then I push the floor away with my hands, coming up to seated position. And just pause for a moment. You were just in a long back bend. So just pause in an upright seated position. And if your feet were on the floor, you can simply cross your ankles and sit there. And then we're going to switch this up a little bit. We're still going to do a reclining position, but we're going to take it to the other end. So I'm going to lie back with my blocks. And then I'm going to lift my hips and put the blocks under my hips instead. So just for a moment here on your back, if you need an additional recovery moment, stay here with your hands relaxing on the floor or block. Little constructive rest again. And then once you feel like your body's ready to go, you can lift your hips and place one block under your sacrum. I've got the block on its lowest height. And then if you want a second block under your sacrum. Feet are walking out pretty far away from each other, so your knees can start to move in toward each other. And if you're not using both blocks, the second block could come between your knees and you could squeeze. Or if you have a third block, take a block between your thighs and squeeze like we did in that tabletop pose at the beginning of class, just kind of gently squeezing the block. Wherever your arms go to allow your armpits to open up and your collarbones to smile and your chest to breathe, so that you're breathing from your belly up into your chest and opening those airways. And so this is going to give you a little traction for your low back after that back bend that you were just in with those 2 blocks. And this is what I meant by taking it to the other end. So instead of stretching your back open, now we're stretching it long and tractioning it. And this will be good recovery for your hips, front of your hips, thighs. Breathe from your belly right into the back, expanding your lungs, 3-dimensionally breathing. At any point in time, if you feel like the 2 blocks is too high, you can remove a block. But let some weight drop down into the blocks from your hips. Let some weight drop down into your feet from your knees. And down into your shoulders from your chest, from your ribs, from your hips. You feel that energetic drop and anchoring. And then you breathe in from the belly to lighten the front and soften the front of your body and open. Notice your jaw. Try to get your tongue to relax in your mouth and your cheeks to soften. If your eyelids are closed, you notice you still have a gaze behind those closed eyelids. So try to drop the gaze back to a deeper place of origination. So you're looking out from the back of your head rather than the front of your head. And then just another breath here before we start to lift those hips. So take a nice smooth inhale. You might want to resituate your feet closer in under your knees or towards your hips more so you can lift the hips a little easier with more leverage, and release 1 block at a time if you've got 2. Settle on that block for just a breath. And then you can lift your hips and relieve that block, get it out of there on the second breath. I've got those 2 blocks now coming behind my hamstrings so I can straighten my legs out and take a rest here. And now my back is just relaxing and coming out of back bend, and it's coming out of tractioning. So after those 2 postures, we're now just letting the back neutralize. And if the blocks under your hamstrings round your spine out too much, you can take the blocks completely out and just let your legs rest on the floor. And land here for just a few moments, feeling your body on the floor, open, receptive. Feel your breath moving in and out of your nose, from your belly, up the spine, traveling around the ribs 3-dimensionally, around the spine 3-dimensionally, and up into your chest. Let your forehead, your brow soften, and the back of your head is supported on the floor gently. And your feet relax. You maybe even scoot your heels out, relax your glutes, and just let your feet fall open. Let your hands relax, your fingers just curl in naturally so they're not gripping or squeezing. And feel your bones get heavy. And feel the floor hold your body. So the back of your body is supported by the floor and the front of your body is soft. Maybe you want to take a few cleansing breaths and inhale through your nose and an open mouth sigh. And let things go with that exhale. Let things go that you don't need here. Any gripping, any thoughts, any feelings that aren't serving you. Maybe they're negative, things that you're holding on to, or worries or concerns. We don't need that here. Just let it out. Sigh it out. And breathe in. Good feelings, positive thoughts, energy. And take as long as you have here to focus on whatever it is you want to focus on, and just being here on your mat. Of course, at the end of your practice, when you are finished, take a moment to bow to you and tell yourself thank you. And please stay as long as you've got. Give yourself this long extra reward for your hard work.